Hey, what's up guys? Alan Bishop here, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, checking in with the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, just doing a doubling run of our Palinka style apple brandy, which you can't really see the stream. There you go. Just now started running, so I'm going to keep an eye on this and be making my cuts here shortly, but I got time for a video. So told you guys in this most recent video series I'd keep you up to date on this particular distillation. It didn't warrant its own distillation video in my opinion, so I thought I'd just share it here. But as always, reach out to me with your questions about the art of distillation, whether it be home distilling or professional distilling. I will do the best I can to answer your questions to the best of my ability with the knowledge I have that I've gained over my years in this art form. So today I have sort of a twofold question. Someone asked me a little bit more to talk a little bit more about backins, and what they mean by backins obviously is your heads and your tails. Some people refer to backins as just tails. I don't tend to use the term backins a whole lot because I do double pot still distillation more than I do anything else, like you know, moonshine distillation with a thumper or anything of that nature, and also what those are useful for, as well as how they get reused, if they get reused, why they should get reused, why they should not get reused. So I'm going to touch on that. And somebody also asked me about sweet water, which is that elusive fifth cut that I've mentioned in a previous video, which is basically the essential oil, the raw material that you started with. So as far as backins, that term typically refers to the heads or tails, as I said, of a moonshine distillation using a thumper. I do a little bit of that. I don't do a ton of it. I have done quite a bit of it. So typically for me, if I'm doing a sugar shine and I'm going to do a white spirit, I will not keep any heads. I treat that the same way as I do double pot distilled brandy. I don't save heads off of double pot distilled brandy to rerun. You can, but to me, they do throw an off flavor into the next distillation. For whiskey, oftentimes, if it's a grain whiskey, and I'm going to age it in particular, I will save those heads and rerun them. Because what does happen is acetaldehyde and ethyl acetate actually break down with heat cycling. So you're not actually building up more acetaldehyde and ethyl acetate. But even at work with double pot still distillation, with the grain whiskeys that I make, I will only rerun those heads into the next stripping run of that same product about 5 cycles. And after 5 cycles, I dump them and start over for the same reason that I don't use them for sugar shine and I never use them for brandy. They start to build up some compounds that I find unattractive, some really funky, grungy earthiness that I don't really like in my distillates and I don't want in my distillates. So I avoid those. Even with, let's say if I was going to run a grain whiskey that was going through a thumper, if I wanted it as a white spirit, which I very rarely do, I would not keep the heads from that whatsoever. Now the tails I always keep. If I'm going to run 50 runs of the same product, whether it be a white moonshine, a white grain whiskey, bourbon barrel or a barrel aged whiskey, or any brandy, I will rerun those tails for 50 cycles. They will always go back into the doubling run the next time, or if I was running a thumper, I would put them into the thumper. Most moonshiners will save their heads and their tails back and put them in their thumper quite often, or even put them back into the main distillation. I shouldn't say most, but that for a long time, that's the way a lot of guys ran their stills, and there's nothing wrong with that. The tails I always rerun, whether or not I'm running a thumper or I'm running a double pot, whatever I'm doing, I always save those tails. And the reason for those tails being rerun is because that's actually where most of your flavor and consistency is. It's where most of those long chain fatty acids are. If you think about it, ethanol itself contains no actual flavor, right? It's just the flavor of ethanol. You get the same experience by going out and buying some Everclear, right? It just has an alcohol nose and an alcohol taste to it. It's the water of the distillation that contains most of those flavor profiles that come across. And even in the tails, even though they become vegetative, they become like boiled squash, boiled broccoli, something of that nature, there's a lot of good alcohol still in there, and there's a lot of good flavor compounds that with heat cycling and thus esterification during the heat cycle, basically that heating cycle breaks down those long chain fatty acids into esters and phenols. So those always end up back in the doubling run of the same product over and over and over and over again, to build those flavors that I find to be positive, to build that mouthfeel, especially in pot still distillation where you get kind of a funky spirit anyway that's oily and heavy bodied. You want those tails every single time. I hope that kind of clears that up for you a little bit. It's probably not the best example of it, but that's the way that I tend to treat heads and tails. And again, terminology wise, I don't use the word backins, but it's because I tend to focus on double pot still distillation in one way, shape, form, or the other. As far as Sweetwater, somebody asked about Sweetwater, and they've done some research on it, and they were confused about where you collect it from. They even asked if you collect Sweetwater off of highline distillation, so rectified distillation, like when we run the 13 stills, one piece at a time, crossover still, and we're running the cold finger, and we take it up to a higher proof and a purity. I don't collect sweet water off of distillations like that. I always only collect sweet water off of double pot still distillation, and it's always on the finishing run. So what I do, and I don't do it for every single product, I only do it for certain ones. I tend to go for the more fruity, floral products, that kind of stuff. I really like that sweet water to be a part of that when it's finished. So you're going to find that particular cut tends to come in below 20 proof. So you're going to use a lot of fuel pulling this off because you're going to be fighting the water alcohol azerotype to get it. But when you get down to, say, between 10 and 18 proof, you're going to find that the alcohol flavor has disappeared, and you just have this kind of sweetened water sort of characteristic that is representative of the material that you were distilling from. That I can do one of two things with. I can either use it to proof down a white spirit. I don't do that very often. Or I can use it to proof down a spirit before it goes into a barrel for maturation, which I do quite often. Or sometimes I will take it, fortify it with a little bit of the spirit that I was distilling with to take the alcohol content up to keep it from turning into vinegar, and I will actually mature it in its own barrel so that in 2-4 years, whatever it is down the line, I've actually aged that sweet water right alongside that product, and I can use it to proof it down. Now I have a distillate that has more of those essential characteristics of what the raw material was, those positive characteristics, and is more representative of the raw material in distillation. As you can probably already see, this is incredibly useful for brandy distillation and rum distillation. Although it does have its uses with bourbon, let's say bourbons in particular, that have oats in them, it works very well with. As always, guys, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, in the YouTube comments below and or any of my social media. Or check out the alchemistcabinet.com. You can go to the Warehouse 1 there. We actually have our new Stave and Bean coffee crossover coffees up there, where we took coffee bean, or John Waddell and Corey Welch took coffee beans and aged them in 2 different unique barrels, one for one piece at a time, which was a previously used corn whiskey barrel that I then took and put Applewood smoked malted corn whiskey in for 9 months. They put some very cool Brazilian coffee beans in there and aged them prior to roasting. And then If You Have Ghost, You Have Everything podcast barrel, which was a previously used corn whiskey barrel that I then used for apple brandy, that then went into, we did a blackberry wine for a friend that we fortified and oxidized and turned into a blackberry port wine. They then aged some Ethiopian Guji coffee in that, and it is just fantastic and fruity and beautiful, and I love it. You can buy that stuff there. You can buy our DVDs there. You can buy our book there, apparel, merchandise, etc. It all goes back into this channel and the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast. So, love you guys. Have a great day. Oh, wait. Before I go, I'm about to make the heads cut off of this apple brandy because I can smell that it's changed. Turn the camera around and show you what she's doing here. Yeah, hard to see the stream. I apologize for the backlit video whenever I'm speaking as well. But get back with you later, guys. Love you. Bye.